So think about this for a second. How does a 600-year-old empire, one of the most powerful in history, just vanish and get replaced by a modern nation-state in less than a decade? It sounds impossible, right? Well, today we're going to dive into that incredible story of transformation, and it all centers on one man, Mustafa Kemal Atatürk.
All right, so let's set the scene. At the start of the 20th century, the Ottoman Empire had this nickname. They called it the Sick Man of Europe. And when you look at this map, you can kind of see why. The sheer scale of the empire is just massive. But that size had become a huge liability it just couldn't control anymore. You've got this sprawling, multi-ethnic, multi-religious state that's really struggling to hold itself together. It's basically crumbling from the inside out.
And this wasn't just some abstract political problem on a map. The decline had a devastating human cost. This quote from Şevket Süreyya Aydemir, wow, it just paints such a vivid picture of the chaos. He talks about refugee neighborhoods, wars, massacres, people fleeing as their armies were defeated over and over. You can just imagine it, families uprooted, running from lost territories as the very borders of their world literally shrank around them.
So let's dig a little deeper into this. Why was the empire in such decline? What exactly was tearing the Ottoman state apart from both inside and out?
Okay, this is where it gets really wild. The depth of the stagnation is just staggering. While Europe is deep into scientific revolutions, the Ottoman state is still running on, believe it or not, medieval knowledge. We're talking Ptolemaic astronomy and Hippocratic medicine. Politically, the Sultan's grip was incredibly weak. Even a huge project like the Hejaz Railway was a total struggle to control. And then you look at the society. It wasn't a unified nation. It was more like a patchwork quilt of different self-governing religious communities, all just kind of existing next to each other.
All right, so into this crumbling, stagnant world steps our main character, a young, incredibly pragmatic, and visionary military officer named Mustafa Kemal. He's on the inside, he sees the rot, and he has a completely, radically different vision for what the future could be.
And his genius was really forged in the hellish trenches of the Gallipoli Campaign. Now, this was an absolutely pivotal moment in World War I. You had this massive Allied invasion aimed at capturing the capital, Istanbul. And it should have worked, but Ottoman forces under his command managed to repel them. His strategic brilliance here was just off the charts, and it's what made him a true national hero.
And this quote, it just shows you he wasn't just a brilliant tactician. The guy was a master psychologist. He understood his men on a deep level. He knew his soldiers were motivated by this powerful faith, this idea of either victory or martyrdom. And he tapped into that. He channeled that belief into an absolutely ferocious will to fight. And that's how he turned what looked like certain defeat into a legendary victory.
And then you have stories like this, which just fueled the legend growing around him. Get this. During the battle, a piece of shrapnel hits him right in the chest. A fatal blow. But it's stopped by the pocket watch he kept there. Come on. Incidents like that create this aura of destiny, right? This feeling that he's being saved for something much bigger. It's the perfect story to capture his charisma and the sense that he was invincible.
And these are his own words, which give us such a raw, unfiltered look into his philosophy. This isn't some fluffy leadership mantra. He's basically saying greatness means you don't try to please anyone. People are going to pile up obstacles in front of you, and your job is to just knock them down. He was a stone-cold pragmatist. For him, leadership meant having a clear goal and pursuing it with just relentless, unsentimental determination, no matter who or what stood in his way.
Okay, so we've met the man. Now let's see how this visionary soldier transforms into a nation builder, literally forging a brand new state from the ashes of a dead empire.
So after World War I, the Ottoman Empire was finished. It was toast. The capital, Istanbul, is occupied by Allied forces. Foreign armies are literally carving up Anatolia, the Turkish heartland, for themselves. It looked like the end. But in response, Mustafa Kemal launches the Turkish War of Independence. This was a truly desperate, backs-against-the-wall struggle for national survival.
And here's the brilliant part. While he's fighting this war, he's also building a new government. It's like he's playing 3D chess. He moves the center of power away from occupied Istanbul to Ankara, right in the heart of Anatolia. And there, he sets up the Grand National Assembly, a totally new political body that declares it represents the Turkish people, directly challenging the authority of the Sultan and the occupiers. A genius move.
And this was the result. After years of absolutely brutal fighting, the nationalist forces win.
This map shows the brand new Republic of Turkey with internationally recognized borders. Just think back to that first map we saw. This is such a powerful visual of what they accomplished. A new, sovereign nation-state literally born from the embers of a dead empire.
But believe it or not, securing the borders, that was just the beginning. For Atatürk, the real revolution, the hard part, was still to come. He was convinced that for Turkey to survive and thrive, it had to be completely remade from the ground up. We're talking culturally, socially, politically, everything had to change. And the sheer speed and scope of his reforms are just breathtaking. I mean, just look at this. He abolished the Sultanate, the 600-year-old hereditary rule, gone. He abolished the Caliphate, the claim to leading the entire Muslim world, gone. Centuries of religious rule, over. He replaces Islamic law with secular legal codes from Europe. He even changes how people write, throwing out the Arabic script for a Latin one. He changes how they dress, mandating Western-style hats. Literally every single aspect of life was being modernized at this absolutely dizzying pace.
Let's talk about that language reform for a second, because it was one of the most radical changes of all. The old Ottoman Turkish script was incredibly complex, really hard to learn. So Atatürk champions his brand new phonetic alphabet based on Latin letters. And you got to understand, this wasn't just about making it easier to read and write. It was a very deliberate, very symbolic break with the Ottoman and Islamic past. It was all about reorienting Turkey towards the West.
So what about the economy? Well, just like with everything else, he was a pragmatist. He adopted this policy called statism, and you can basically think of it as a third way between pure capitalism and pure socialism. Instead of waiting for private industry, the state itself took the lead. They used 5-year plans, kind of inspired by the Soviets, to rapidly build up the country's industries. The goal? Economic self-sufficiency, fast.
And his social reforms were just as revolutionary. I love this little detail. This is a note he jotted down in the margin of a play script. This is not how we look at women. They're the foundation of the nation. And he backed it up. He championed women's rights, giving them the right to vote and hold office. Get this, long before many Western countries did. He was actively pushing for their participation in all parts of public life. A real game changer. So what's the final verdict on this massive, top-down revolution? Let's take a look at Atatürk's enduring and, often very debated legacy. When you boil it all down, his ultimate vision was for Turkey to become a respected, modern member of the global community. And it's a key point. He didn't just want to copy the West. He wanted Turkey to participate in what he saw as a universal human civilization, one that was marching forward based on reason and progress.
In this quote, man, this just cuts right to the very core of his entire philosophy. We derive our inspiration not from heaven or the unseen world, but directly from life. Everything was based on that secular, pragmatic idea. It was a radical break from a past where religion and tradition called all the shots. For Atatürk, the source of authority wasn't scripture. It was reason, science, and the real, observable world.
But of course, this approach is still controversial. He was passionately, you could even say fiercely, anti-clerical. He truly despised the old religious establishment, the Hokas. In his mind, a cultural revolution couldn't be a half measure. And so, to this day, his critics argue that this uncompromising secularism was just too extreme, that he should have found a way to allow a greater role for Islam in public life.
And that really brings us to the central, nagging question of his legacy. See, Atatürk was completely unapologetic about his methods. He believed that real change had to be imposed from the top down by an enlightened elite. He simply did not trust the masses to choose modernity for themselves. Which leaves us with a pretty provocative question to chew on. Can a truly free and modern nation really be built by force, even if it's with the very best of intentions?